Hey, let's make something. Today we're going to make resin miniatures. This is the whole process. So it starts by sculpting things out of cosplay. Here's some miniature bottles I've made before, just, like liquor bottles and medicine bottles for other miniatures. And I really like cosplay because it's kind of rubbery when it's baked, which is very helpful. It doesn't break easily. And it's just gray, but this isn't a project where we need to worry about the color, so gray is just fine. First, there's going to be a lot of rolling out and, very carefully trying to shape some cylinders and things, because the annoying thing about bottles and jars is they're so symmetrical. Oh, here we go. Fresh milk, that's what we're making first. And I like that on the label, it actually says Lon Lon in the secret Hylian language, which is a throwback to Lon Lon Ranch, if you remember some of the older games. And this I'm just using some different rods and a sharp blade to shape some bottles. Here's Goron Spice, another one. This one, it has a bit of an angled shape. The first one, as you saw, was just a plain cylinder, so that was a little easy. Started with that one. And this, I tried to get it angled so it's smaller at the bottom than the top. I think I did okay for that one. And this next one is the Hasty Elixir. We only see this for a second, but we're going to come back to it. This one was a lot of fun. This is simply rock salt. It's just a cartoon-shaped rock with, a lot of flat sides, which was kind of a lot of fun to carve out. Pretty rough right now, but we'll work on that later. You can probably see up top there's a round bottle. I revised that one actually. But what I'm actually working on, the oil jar. I really like that this one has square sides. They're also kind of angled, which was a little tricky. And sometimes with miniatures, you sort of make a judgment call on what's worth really trying to get right and what isn't. And I decided, I'll make it have square sides. That'll be good. And then I angle the top so it comes to a little point. And then later you'll see I can attach the bottleneck to that. I do like figuring out how to construct the shape of different miniatures. That's a lot of fun. Shaper. These are so useful. You can get sets of silicone shaper tools just at any craft website or Amazon even. They're very good. They're like fingers with no fingerprints to really smooth things out. Here we go. Everything's going in the oven. That's something that is really useful. I didn't learn that right away when I was making miniatures, but you don't want to try to sculpt the whole thing at once. It's better to bake it and then add more pieces later, which you can do. You can always rebake. A lot of sanding involved, smoothing out some of these rough edges. Oh, now it's time for some bottle corks. This stuff is great. Liquid Sculpey. It's supposed to bond polymer clay in the oven, which it does. And it's supposed to help especially bond baked clay to raw clay, which doesn't always work without something like that. Here's the Hasty Elixir again. So I'm putting the wider neck of the bottle on there. Anyway, Liquid Sculpey, which I think is a lot like PVA glue. I'm not actually sure they're all that different, because you can put PVA glue in the oven, apparently. So, this one's pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect, because as we saw for the fresh milk, it doesn't actually show you what the top of that bottle looks like. It's covered in fabric, so It's a good way to cheat a little bit. There we go. I got that into a good point. It's funny doing this kind of like director's commentary where I'm interested in what I am doing. Here we go. Yeah. Let's put that bottle together. These shapers, they really do an excellent job of just gently making clay work together. It's hard to explain, but if you're trying to do this with your fingers, you are definitely going to be smushing things out of shape. That's the one hard thing about making miniatures. Your hands are too big for what you're doing a lot of the time, which is a frustrating feeling. But it also teaches you to really focus, which I love about it. Making that tiny little jug handle for the oil jar. Another thing is, for resin, you can't ever have any space where, when you're making the mold, the silicone could fill that space in, because then you won't be able to take the object out of the mold. So if you make like a coffee mug, or here like this oil jar with this hollow handle, you have to fill it in, and then later when you have the finished piece, you can then drill it out. Because if you leave it hollow, it will just lock that piece right into the mold. What am I doing? What am I doing now? Oh, here we go. This poor thing. Yeah, I made that. I thought, it's a bottle that has a narrow neck and then it's round at the bottom. But after I made it and baked it, I realized I didn't like it and I was going to try again. So you'll see that in a minute. Sometimes you just have to make something to really know, Ugh, this rock is so satisfying. Just shaving off just a little more, a little more. This blade I have, it's very good for polymer clay. They're actually medical tissue blades. I heard about that many years ago, and I've always bought those. Mine, here you can see, it's a bit stained. It's probably 20 years old. Still good and sharp, though. I don't use it for anything but polymer clay. Yeah, there it is. Perfect little video game rock. Here we go. Now, I had a better idea. Because it's so round at the bottom, but then it has that angle up to the neck, I figured I would put it into a round semicircular mold to make sure that bottom is really correct. It's hard to get the top right, but you see I'm trying a few different cylindrical tools, handles of things mostly. Not too bad in the end. I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah. I'm sorry I keep moving my hands out of frame. I learned it is extremely hard to do that correctly, but hopefully I will get better at it. And everything's going to go back into the oven again. Alright, now we got the shape of the jar completely done. Now it's time for the cork. I find it quite relaxing to work on things so small because you really have to take your time. And I wanted to make sure that it looked like a cork. So I'm just dimpling it with the other end of one of those silicone shapers. They have little ball styluses at the other end. I like that. Even though it's just, very lightly indented into the clay, Silicone really will hold the shape of everything. Like, if you have a fingerprint on an item that you put into a silicone mold, it will bring that fingerprint out in the things you mold with it, so you have to be careful. But it's useful for very delicate textures. Yeah, this Goron Spice, it didn't look like it had a cork in the official art. It looks like it has a little round wooden stopper, so that's what I tried to do. It looked a little bit rough on top, like the wood was cracking. Precision work. That's my favorite. I'm just mesmerized by myself doing this. Pretty good. Yeah, a lot of sculpting miniatures is shaping them and then very gently trying to fix where you clumsily crushed them a little bit with your fingers. So that's just the nature of it. A lot of sanding. And then adding clay in layers, like I said, is great for making sure you don't really crush the entire thing. For this bottle, which is the Monster Extract, I diverged a little bit from the official art because it shows a little gold stopper that looks like a gem that has a lot of very pointy facets. And I didn't have anything like that, and I didn't really want to buy anything just for that, but I did have cone-shaped beads, so I knew if I got a bead in there, it would look pretty much like it. And then you see I put a little drop of liquid clay in the top, and it's just going to give it a little round finial on top, like on a banister or something. And to me, that's close enough. Like, sometimes you just have to decide. Close enough. Here I am coating everything that's been baked in clear glaze, just clear acrylic glaze, because if I wanted to have the glossy finish of glass when it comes out of the mold, the resin, I have to make sure that it has a glossy finish now. And some of the things I don't bother coating, like the oil jar, didn't bother with that because I'm going to paint that anyways. It's opaque. But all these things I want to be nice and shiny. Although I didn't do the cork or the little wooden stopper either because I'm going to paint those too. It's very handy to attach your miniatures to a popsicle stick or something to hold them with some double-sided tape, because they're too small to hold and paint at the same time. I think I did 2 coats, and I was kind of excited to finish this whole process, so that's all I did. 3 I think would have been even better, because you want a really high gloss finish for glass. I think it came out alright, but 3, that would have been really good. Here we go. Silicone mold maker kit. I got this on Amazon. You can see a million of them. I think they're all about the same. $20. You get 2 big bottles of Formula A and Formula B. You mix them together for 5 minutes, and then you can make a mold with them. So I'm sticking all these items into a Dixie cup. It's good that it's something you can destroy, because you kind of need to get the mold out, but sticking them there with double-sided tape at the bottom, and then filling it up with the mixed together silicone. And yeah, 12 hours later, we come back. It's all set up nicely. It has the texture of like a silicone spatula when it's all done. So it's firm but flexible. So I should have said, but I tried to make sure the items weren't too close together, because you have to kind of stretch the mold a little bit to pull the things out, and it is very flexible, but you could tear it if it's too thin or you pull it too hard, so you just need to be careful. But it is quite sturdy, so it's easy to pull these things loose. Satisfying. Resin dye. Just epoxy resin dye that I bought on Amazon, I think. It came in 16 colors, which is nice because then I can choose different, warm or cool shades. This is quite a warm pink that I used. You can see I used the tiniest bit because I want that pink rock salt to just barely be colored. I could have probably used a little less, actually. I'm okay with this, but, even less would have been fine. Also, because miniatures, being so small, having so little volume to them, it really concentrates the color as well. So I mix it, I fill it right up to the top. I like to use just a wooden skewer or something to just get the tiniest amounts possible in there at a time. You want to go slow, cleaning it up with a Q-tip. Yeah, here's where I decided, because the oil jar is going to be painted anyway, I would use whatever resin I had left over from other items. So you see I partially filled up the square oil jar mold with pink from salt. And now I'm putting clear into the bottles. It's very tricky to get air bubbles out. That's probably the biggest frustration with working with resin. This is UV resin, so it cures very quickly with a UV light or sunlight. And I love that about it, but it is thick and it will make air bubbles if you're not extremely careful. You want to try to get the resin into the bottom of the container before it fills up the top, because that's how you get air bubbles, but boy, it's hard to do. I just put some white into the milk, and now I'm mixing a little bit of peacock blue dye with some Pearlex powder, which I really love. I love the shimmering powders from Jacala Pearlex. You can find those at all craft stores. I think I got a set of them, I don't know, decades ago, and I still have them because I use a tiny little bit, and it looks so pretty. I think the actual hasty elixir in the game is not shimmery, but why not take that opportunity? Now, this might be a little strange. I'm using some actual paprika to make the Goron spice. It's hard to get anything to look like it's inside an actual jar in miniatures because, of course, this isn't a hollow jar that I could just fill with paprika. So I'm mixing paprika into the resin, putting that into the mold, and it's going to look like the jar is filled up with paprika. It's going to give that illusion. Oh, also, if you didn't catch it, I filled the tops, so pretty. I filled the tops of the jars, molds with clear resin, so it would look like, the glass of the jar. And then the lower portion I filled with the various liquids. That one came out so nice. I actually wish I'd filled the jar molds with a little more clear resin. It's really hard to judge because you're seeing it upside down. It's very small. You're not really seeing into it. But, it's okay. You can always try again. There's that spice, which I think is pretty good. Up close, you can see the individual grains through the clear resin. Oh, and I used the extra of that spice resin that I had left over to finish up the oil jar. So that is all set now. You can see it has that kind of frosted look to the surface because it wasn't varnished. And now, my favorite, monster extract, with a little violet dye to it. Again, You just need the tiniest, tiniest bit. Because it's very potent. Through the magic of editing, I know what is about to happen next. Heartbreaking. So we try again. That is because of an air bubble. And it is very hard to tell if the mold is filled all the way to the bottom. Ah, but I got it this time. I'm lucky I only had one failure in this video because, you know, it's extremely hard to check and make sure that you don't have an air bubble. And then, when you pop something out of the mold, maybe, I don't know, 25% of the time, I'll have a failure, which is a shame. Sometimes if the bubble's inside or, you know, further along the wall, you might not even have to worry about it. Oh, here we go. I'm drilling out the handle. This is a handheld Dremel, which I love. It's great for sanding, and you can get different polishing tips, drills, of course. And resin is hard, but it's not that strong, so it's not too hard to drill it out. I'm painting these in dark brown, and then I go over it with a light brown dry brushing to try to bring out the edges of the split wood and the little holes in the cork. Oh yes, and dry brushing white onto that pink salt to give it that salty, chalky appearance that it has in the game. I like my jokes. That fell on the floor, but I was able to go get it, no problem. Painting the oil jar in that nice beige clay color. Coloring the gold parts of the monster extract with a gold paint pen, which is very handy. I also have a silver one. And now the red glaze on top of that oil jar. Again, using one of those ball styluses to do the little drips. It's a lot handier than a small paintbrush, I find, for a lot of very small designs. I'm using it again here to do the leaf pattern or flower pattern on the oil jar, which I don't quite get right. It's a little bit clumsy, but it's pretty close. Again, for all these, I'm just using acrylic paint. I do like when a design comes out, though. And more gold. This is tough. I had to hold my breath for this one, trying to get that. It's kind of like the bottle has a necklace. It has a ring, and then it has these little petals that come down, which I just did freehand, which is silly. I really should have measured it out, but it worked out okay. I had to make the labels off camera because I was filming this on my phone, and I had all the reference photos on my phone, and I could not remember exactly what the things looked like, so I had to take care of that. But I just painted some computer paper, just regular computer paper, with watered down acrylic paint to be the colors that I wanted. And then I cut those out with a little X-Acto knife. And here I'm using some Mod Podge to make this paper that I have painted off-white look like it's fabric that has been smushed around the top of this jar and then held in place with some cord. Mod Podge is great for this because it's a decoupage paste, so it's basically a glue with varnish in it, and it will shape paper or fabric into whatever shape you want, and then, lacquer it right down in place. These tiny, tiny labels on these jars. Bane of my existence. So I'm just using embroidery floss that I've pulled one strand out of. And yeah, you just gotta punch a little hole and string it through. No other way to do it. This is also tricky because in the game it's just sort of draped around the neck of the bottle. It's not really attached in a firm, practical way. So I just sort of looped the thread around. That's good enough. Hard to tie a knot when your fingers are too big. I'll figure it out. And then I think this was off camera, but I did secure the labels in place, hanging from the jars, and secured the cord in exactly the shape I wanted with just some more Mod Podge, which does dry clear, so you do not see it. Oh, love that little jar. So shimmery. You just want to drink that hasty elixir, huh? Trying to get everything exactly as I want it before I put Mod Podge everywhere on top of it. And then the same kind of procedure, carefully tying tiny knots in red thread this time for the milk. And in the reference photo, it seems as though the picture of the cow and the words are printed directly onto the bottle. I was afraid my pen might not do that good of a job, that it might smear, so I decided to go with a paper label. And that's it. They're all done. And I want to say thank you so much for watching my video. I had a lot of fun making these things. I hope you had fun watching. And I'll leave you with one last look